The restaurant buzzed with warmth and elegance, its golden lights casting a soft glow on the polished floors. The air carried the rich aroma of freshly baked bread, sizzling steaks, and delicate herbs. It was one of the finest places in the city, known for its exquisite menu and top-tier service. Wealthy customers often dined here, enjoying luxurious meals while chatting about business deals, expensive vacations, and the latest fashion trends. On this particular evening, the glass doors swung open, and in walked Veronica Sinclair. Dressed in a designer red dress with matching high heels, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed she owned the world. Her jewelry sparkled under the lights, and the scent of her expensive perfume filled the air as she stepped forward. Behind her, two of her equally well-dressed friends followed, laughing softly as they took in the restaurant's fine decor. The host, a young man in a crisp black suit, greeted her with a polite smile. "Good evening, ma'am. Do you have a reservation?" Veronica lifted her chin slightly. "Of course," she replied, her voice smooth but commanding. "Under the name Veronica Sinclair." The host quickly scanned the list and nodded. "Right this way, ma'am." He led the group to one of the best tables in the restaurant, near a large window overlooking the city. Outside, the streetlights twinkled, and the gentle hum of life continued beyond the glass. Veronica barely glanced at the view. She had seen better in her penthouse. Instead, she settled into her chair, crossing her legs gracefully as she picked up the menu. As her friends admired the menu, a young waitress approached their table. She had a friendly smile, her uniform neatly pressed, and a small notepad in her hand. Her name tag read Emma. "Good evening, ladies," she greeted them cheerfully. "Welcome to our restaurant. May I start you off with some drinks?" Veronica barely looked at her. Instead, she continued examining the menu, tapping her manicured nails against the leather cover. After a moment, she let out a small sigh and finally glanced up. "What's the best thing you have?" she asked, her tone carrying a hint of impatience. Emma remained polite. "Well, our chef's special tonight is a delicious rosemary-infused steak with garlic butter. It's one of our most popular dishes." Veronica tilted her head and smirked. "And how would you know? Have you even tried it?" Emma hesitated but then nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Our staff gets to taste new dishes so we can recommend them." Veronica let out a short laugh, shaking her head. "How nice. Imagine that, working here and getting free food. Must be a dream job, huh?" Her friends giggled quietly, but Emma stayed professional. "It's a wonderful place to work, ma'am. We take pride in what we do." Veronica arched an eyebrow. "Pride? In serving people?" She exchanged glances with her friends before turning back to Emma. "That's cute." Emma's smile didn't fade, but something flickered in her eyes, something unreadable. Still, she remained calm. "Would you like to start with drinks while you decide on your meals?" Veronica sighed dramatically, flipping a hand in the air. "Fine. I'll have a glass of your most expensive white wine." Her friends followed her lead, ordering drinks with equal confidence. Emma jotted down their choices and nodded. "I'll bring those right out." As she walked away, Veronica leaned in toward her friends, whispering just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Did you see how she looked at me? Like she actually thought I cared about her job." Her friends chuckled, amused by her words. Meanwhile, across the restaurant, an older woman sat quietly at a corner table, observing everything. She had been watching from the moment Veronica entered. Her expression remained calm, but there was something thoughtful in her eyes, something almost knowing. And as Emma returned to the counter to prepare their drinks, she, too, remained unaware of what was about to unfold, an encounter that would change everything. Ma carefully balanced the tray in her hands as she made her way back to the table. The glasses of white wine sparkled under the lights, the liquid inside swirling gently as she walked. She had been serving customers for a long time, so she knew how to carry herself with grace. No matter how people treated her, she always kept a polite smile and did her job with sincerity. As she reached the table, she placed each glass down gently. "Here are your drinks, ladies," she said warmly. Veronica picked up her glass and swirled the wine before taking a small sip. She pressed her lips together, as if she were a wine critic, then set the glass down. She muttered. "It's decent, I suppose." Emma stayed silent, waiting for their food order. One of Veronica's friends finally looked up and said, "I'll have the chef's special, the rosemary steak." The second friend nodded. "Same here. Medium rare." Emma scribbled down their orders, then turned to Veronica, who still had the menu in her hand. "And for you, ma'am." Veronica sighed as if making a decision was exhausting. "Do you even know what's good here?" she asked. Emma nodded. "Yes, Mom. Every dish is prepared with care. If you'd like something rich in flavor, the truffle pasta is excellent. If you prefer something light, the grilled salmon is a customer favorite." Veronica tilted her head, studying Emma as if trying to find something amusing about her. "And do you think I look like someone who eats simple dishes?" Emma hesitated but then said, "The choice is yours, Mom." Veronica smirked. "Fine. I'll have the steak too, but make sure it's cooked perfectly. If it's even slightly overdone, I'll send it back." Emma nodded and wrote it down. "Of course, ma'am. It will be prepared just as you like." As she turned to leave, Veronica suddenly spoke again. "Wait." Emma stopped and turned back. "Yes, Mom." Veronica leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "I'm curious. Why did you choose to work here? I mean, isn't there anything better you could be doing?" Emma blinked, surprised by the question. "I love working here," she said simply. "It's a wonderful restaurant, and I enjoy serving people." Veronica let out a small laugh. "Enjoy serving people? That's a new one." Her friends chuckled along with her, but Emma remained calm. "Yes, Mom. It's honest work, and I take pride in it." Veronica tilted her head. "Pride, huh? You must not have had many options if this is what you're proud of." Emma's grip on the notepad tightened slightly, but she didn't let her emotions show. She had dealt with difficult customers before, and she knew that the best response was always patience. Instead of reacting, she simply said, "I'll place your order now. Please enjoy your drinks." As Emma walked away, Veronica leaned back in her chair, shaking her head with a smirk. "Did you hear that? She actually likes working here. I can't imagine doing a job like that every day." One of her friends laughed. "Maybe some people don't have a choice, Veronica." Veronica shrugged. "Well, that's exactly why I worked hard, to never have to do a job like that." She glanced over at Emma, who was now busy at the counter. "I just don't understand people like her." Meanwhile, from across the restaurant, the same older woman from before continued watching. She had remained quiet the entire time, sipping her tea and observing every word, every action. She had seen customers like Veronica before, people who thought wealth made them better than others. But she also saw something else. The moment Emma turned around, the older woman noticed something familiar in her eyes. Strength, dignity, a quiet confidence that people like Veronica would never understand. And though no one knew it yet, the night was far from over. Something was about to happen that would change everything. Emma took a deep breath as she stepped into the kitchen, carefully placing the order slip on the counter for the chefs. The kitchen was alive with movement, chefs chopping vegetables, flames flickering on the stovetop, and the sound of dishes clinking as meals were prepared with precision. The delicious aroma of sizzling steak, fresh herbs, and creamy sauces filled the air. Despite the warmth of the kitchen, Emma felt a slight chill. Veronica's words echoed in her mind, words filled with judgment and arrogance. She had served many customers before, some kind and others rude, but something about Veronica's attitude was different. It wasn't just the way she spoke, it was the way she looked at her, as if she was invisible, as if she didn't matter. But Emma had learned long ago not to let people like that affect her. She straightened her shoulders. put on a smile, and walked back into the dining area. At Veronica's table, the three women continued their conversation, laughing softly as they sipped their expensive wine. They hardly noticed Emma moving around, checking on other customers, refilling water glasses, and making sure everyone was satisfied. A few minutes later, Emma returned with a small basket of freshly baked bread. She placed it on their table with a polite smile. "Here's some warm bread while your food is being prepared. Let me know if you need anything else." Veronica picked up a piece, examining it as if searching for something to criticize. She said, taking a small bite. "It's fine, I suppose." Emma simply nodded, unbothered by her unimpressed tone. "I'm glad you like it, ma'am." Just as she was about to leave, Veronica spoke again. "Tell me something, Emma." Emma turned back, keeping her hands gently clasped in front of her. "Yes, Mom." Veronica leaned forward, resting her elbow on the table. "Do you ever think about doing something more with your life?" Emma blinked, unsure what she meant. "I'm happy with what I do, Mom." Veronica smirked. "Really? You enjoy taking orders from people like me?" Emma remained calm, her polite smile never fading. "Serving people isn't about taking orders, ma'am. It's about making sure they have a good experience." Veronica laughed lightly, shaking her head. "That's a nice way of putting it. But let's be honest. You're stuck in this job, aren't you? No one chooses to be a waitress." Emma's smile faltered just slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Everyone has their own path, ma'am. And I believe every job has value." Veronica raised an eyebrow. "That's an interesting way to look at it." She took another sip of her wine, then shrugged. "Well, I suppose someone has to do these kinds of jobs." Emma didn't respond. She simply nodded and said, "Your food will be out shortly," before walking away. As she left, one of Veronica's friends shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Veronica, don't you think you're being a little harsh?" Veronica laughed. "Oh, come on. I'm just making conversation. It's not my fault she chose to work here." Meanwhile, across the restaurant, the older woman who had been silently observing the scene took another slow sip of her tea. She had been watching everything, every word, every smirk, every glance. And in that moment, a small smile appeared on her lips. The night wasn't over yet. And soon, Veronica would learn something she never expected. Something that would change the way she saw Emma forever. The restaurant remained lively, with the soft clinking of glasses and the quiet hum of conversations filling the air. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, serving guests with polite smiles, while the chefs worked efficiently in the kitchen, preparing each dish with care. At Veronica's table, she and her friends continued chatting, occasionally glancing around the restaurant. Veronica, as always, carried herself with a certain superiority, her expression one of quiet amusement as she observed the other diners. Emma soon returned, carrying a tray with 3 beautifully plated steak dishes. The aroma of the rich, buttery sauce mixed with the scent of fresh rosemary, making the meal look even more tempting. With steady hands, she carefully placed each plate in front of them. "Here you go, ladies," Emma said with a warm smile. "Your chef's special steak, cooked just as you ordered. Let me know if you need anything else." Veronica glanced at her plate, and then back at Emma. "We'll see if it's actually perfect," she said, picking up her knife and fork. She slowly cut into the steak, watching the juices seep out, and took a small bite. Emma waited, knowing how particular some customers could be about their food. Veronica chewed thoughtfully, then gave a slow nod. It's actually quite good." Emma's smile remained. "I'm glad you like it, ma'am. Enjoy your meal." She turned and walked away, leaving the women to their food. As Emma continued serving other tables, she could still feel Veronica's gaze on her from time to time, as if she were being analyzed like an object of curiosity. But Emma was used to that kind of attention from certain customers. She didn't let it bother her. Meanwhile, across the room, The older woman continued watching. Her eyes, sharp and observant, missed nothing. A few minutes later, Emma returned to check on the table. "Is everything to your liking?" she asked politely. One of Veronica's friends nodded. "Yes, it's delicious. Thank you." Veronica, however, leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. "Tell me something, Emma," she said, tilting her head slightly. Emma met her gaze with quiet patience. "Yes, Mom." Veronica tapped a finger against the table. "How long have you been working here?" Emma hesitated for a brief moment before answering. "A while now, ma'am." Veronica raised an eyebrow. "And is this what you plan to do forever? Be a waitress?" Emma remained calm, though she could feel the eyes of nearby customers subtly turning toward their table. "I enjoy working here," Emma said simply. "It's a great place." Veronica smirked. "I see. Well, I suppose not everyone has big dreams." There was a short silence. Then one of Veronica's friends shifted uncomfortably. "Veronica," she murmured, sensing the growing tension. But Veronica ignored her. "I mean, really, Emma, if you had the chance, wouldn't you want to do something better with your life?" Emma smiled softly, but there was a strength behind it. "Success isn't just about where you work, ma'am. It's about how you do your work." Veronica let out a quiet chuckle. "That's a nice thought." She picked up her wine glass and took another sip before adding, "But I believe real success is about being in charge, not serving people, but being the one who owns something." Emma simply nodded. "That's one way to see it, ma'am." Veronica studied her for a moment as if trying to figure something out. Then she shrugged and returned to her meal. Across the restaurant, the older woman watching them placed her teacup down gently. Her lips curled into a small smile, and her eyes held a knowing look. She had heard every word. And soon, Veronica would realize just how wrong she had been. The restaurant remained filled with quiet chatter, the soft clinking of silverware against plates, and the occasional laughter from guests enjoying their meals. The warm lighting reflected beautifully off the polished wooden tables, creating an atmosphere of elegance and comfort. At Veronica's table, she and her friends continued eating, their plates nearly empty. The rich flavors of the steak had satisfied them, but for Veronica, something else still lingered in her mind. Emma. There was something about the way the waitress carried herself that irritated Veronica. Emma wasn't like other servers who hurried around nervously, afraid of making mistakes. She was calm, confident, and composed. It was as if nothing Veronica said could shake her. And that made Veronica curious. She sipped the last of her wine and leaned back in her chair, glancing around the restaurant. Her eyes landed on the older woman sitting alone at the corner table. The woman had been there for a while, quietly observing, but she didn't seem like an ordinary customer. There was something about her, something dignified. Veronica frowned slightly, but then turned back to her friends. "Well," she said, setting down her glass, "I suppose the food was good, but the service could have been more entertaining." One of her friends sighed. "Veronica, must you always be like this?" Veronica smirked. "I'm just saying, people like her should be a little more humble. After all, we're the reason she has a job." Before her friends could respond, Emma returned to the table, her usual warm and professional smile in place. "Did you enjoy your meal, Mom?" Veronica tilted her head, pretending to think. "It was acceptable," she said slowly. "I suppose I won't be asking for a refund." Emma's smile didn't waver. "I'm glad to hear that, Ma'am." Veronica glanced at her friends before looking back at Emma. "Tell me something," she said, her voice light but sharp. "If you had the chance, wouldn't you rather be sitting at this table instead of serving it?" There was a brief silence. The question was pointed, meant to embarrass, but Emma remained composed. She clasped her hands gently in front of her and met Veronica's gaze with quiet confidence. "I believe every role has its own value, Mom," Emma said, "and I take pride in mine." Veronica let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. "You keep saying that, but really, wouldn't you rather be successful?" Before Emma could respond, a voice from across the room interrupted. Success comes in many forms. Everyone turned toward the corner of the restaurant. The older woman who had been silently observing finally stood up. She was dressed simply but elegantly, her presence commanding attention. There was a quiet power in her voice, one that made even Veronica pause. The woman walked toward the table, her expression calm but firm. As she reached them, the staff members around the restaurant subtly straightened, as if they knew exactly who she was. Emma, however, remained unfazed. She simply smiled. Veronica raised an eyebrow. "And who might you be?" The woman returned her gaze steadily before speaking in a voice that was both gentle and strong. "I," she said, "am the owner of this restaurant." A hush fell over the table. Veronica's smirk faded as she blinked in surprise. Her friends exchanged shocked glances, suddenly realizing that the woman before them was not just another customer. And then, as the realization settled in, Veronica's expression changed completely. She had been mocking Emma all evening, assuming she was just another waitress with nowhere to go in life. But now, standing before her, was the very person who owned everything around her. And Veronica had no idea what was coming next. For the first time that evening, Veronica looked truly speechless. She stared at the older woman, trying to process what she had just heard. You're the owner?" Veronica asked, her voice lacking its usual arrogance. The woman nodded with a calm smile. "Yes, I am." Veronica quickly glanced at Emma, then back at the woman. She had spent the entire evening looking down on the waitress, assuming she was just an ordinary employee with no ambitions. But now, standing before her, was the person who owned the very restaurant she had been dining in. Her friends looked equally stunned, their expressions filled with surprise and a hint of embarrassment. The woman pulled out a chair and sat down gracefully at the table, her eyes never leaving Veronica. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation," she said. "You seem to have strong opinions about success and those who serve others." Veronica shifted in her seat, suddenly uncomfortable. "I was just making conversation," she muttered, trying to brush it off. The woman smiled gently but firmly. "Of course, but let me tell you something about success." She glanced at Emma, who stood quietly by the table, still as calm as ever. "Many people believe that success is about power, wealth, or status. They think it's about owning things, sitting at fancy tables, and looking down on others. But real success is not just about what you have. It's about who you are." Veronica swallowed, unsure of what to say. The woman continued, "I built this restaurant from the ground up. It wasn't easy. There were long nights, sacrifices, and moments when I wondered if it was even possible. But do you know who stood by me through it all?" She paused for a moment before saying, "Emma." Veronica's eyes widened slightly. The woman smiled warmly at Emma. "She has been with me from the very beginning. When I first started, this place was nothing more than a small kitchen and a handful of tables. Emma worked just as hard as I did to make it what it is today. She didn't just serve customers. She helped shape this restaurant into something special." Veronica's fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass. She had spent the whole evening assuming Emma was just an ordinary waitress, someone who had no choice but to work in a restaurant. But now, she was realizing the truth. Emma wasn't just an employee. She was a part of the foundation of this successful business. The woman turned her gaze back to Veronica. "You asked Emma if she ever wanted to sit at this table instead of serving it." Her expression softened, but her voice remained steady. "Let me tell you something. Emma doesn't need to sit at this table, because in reality, this entire restaurant is her table too." Silence hung over the table. Veronica's friends looked between her and the restaurant owner, their expressions filled with discomfort. Emma finally spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "I believe in hard work, ma'am, and I believe that treating people with kindness and respect is just as important as any job title." Veronica exhaled slowly. She had spent the evening acting as if she were superior, as if Emma was beneath her. But now she could feel the weight of her own words, and for the first time, she didn't have a clever response. The woman stood up, smoothing out her elegant dress. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, ladies," she said with a polite smile before walking away. Emma gave a small nod and followed her, leaving Veronica and her friends sitting in stunned silence. For the first time in a long while, Veronica felt something unfamiliar, humility. And as she watched Emma walk away, she realized that she had made a terrible mistake. She had judged someone without knowing their story. And now she wasn't sure if she could ever undo it. Veronica sat frozen in her chair, her fingers lightly tapping against the edge of her plate. The restaurant owner's words echoed in her mind, repeating over and over. "Emma doesn't need to sit at this table," because in reality, this entire restaurant is her table too. For the first time that evening, she felt something unusual, discomfort. Not because of the food, not because of the service, but because of herself. She had come in feeling like the most important person in the room, looking down on a waitress she had assumed was beneath her. But now she realized how wrong she had been. Her friends sat quietly, avoiding eye contact with her. They had witnessed the entire conversation, and while none of them had spoken up earlier, the awkwardness in the air told Veronica they had seen her mistake. One of her friends, Laura, finally broke the silence. She sighed and said, "You know, Veronica, maybe you went too far this time." Veronica frowned, but didn't respond. She wasn't used to being called out like this. She had always spoken her mind without worrying about what others thought. But tonight, something felt different. Her other friend, Rachel, shifted uncomfortably. "Honestly, I didn't know Emma was so important to this place. She carried herself with so much dignity. And now it all makes sense. She's not just a waitress. She's someone." Veronica exhaled sharply and leaned back in her chair. "Everyone's acting like I committed a crime," she muttered. "I was just making conversation." Laura shook her head. "No, Veronica, you weren't just making conversation. You were belittling someone. And now we know that the person you look down on is actually a huge part of this restaurant's success." Veronica remained silent, stirring the last few drops of wine in her glass. Deep down, she knew they were right. Across the room, Emma continued working as if nothing had happened. She moved gracefully between tables, refilling water glasses, smiling at guests, and making sure everyone was taken care of. There was no bitterness in her expression, no sign of anger. She wasn't like Veronica. If the roles had been reversed, Veronica knew she wouldn't have handled the situation as calmly as Emma had. She would have been insulted, offended, and probably lashed out. But Emma had remained polite, composed, and professional. And now Veronica was starting to admire that. She turned her gaze toward the owner, who was speaking with another table. The woman looked confident, strong, and wise, just like Emma. It was clear that Emma had learned a lot from her. For the first time in a long time, Veronica felt small, not in a way that made her feel worthless, but in a way that made her realize she had a lot to learn. She had spent so much time chasing wealth and status, believing that true success was about power and position. But tonight, she had seen another kind of success, one built on kindness, patience, and respect. She sighed and placed her napkin on the table. Then, after a moment of hesitation, she stood up. Laura and Rachel exchanged surprised glances. "Where are you going?" Laura asked. Veronica took a deep breath. "I need to do something I don't usually do." Her friends looked confused but watched as Veronica slowly made her way across the restaurant. She wasn't sure what she was going to say. She had never apologized to a waitress before, but something inside her told her that tonight needed to be different. As she approached Emma, her heart pounded slightly. Emma turned toward her, her polite smile still in place. Veronica swallowed her pride, took a deep breath, and said the one thing she had never expected to say. "Emma, I think I owe you an apology." The word hung in the air, and for the first time that night, Veronica wasn't the most important person in the room. And for once, she was okay with that. Emma looked at Veronica, slightly surprised by her words. The woman who had spent the evening mocking her was now standing before her, admitting she had been wrong. It was unexpected, but Emma had always believed that people could change if they truly wanted to. Veronica took a deep breath. Apologizing was not something she did often, but tonight felt different. She had spent the evening making judgments about Emma without knowing anything about her. Now, she knew the truth, and it made her feel ashamed. I was wrong, Veronica admitted. I spoke without thinking. I assumed things about you without knowing your story. And for that, I'm sorry. Emma studied her for a moment, searching her face for sincerity. She could see that Veronica was struggling, but she also saw something else, genuine regret. A gentle smile formed on Emma's lips. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. Veronica exhaled in relief. She had expected Emma to be cold or dismissive, but instead she was warm and kind, just as she had been all evening. I guess I have a lot to learn, Veronica said with a small, awkward laugh. Emma nodded, her expression calm. We all do, ma'am. Every day is a chance to grow. Veronica glanced toward the owner, who was watching the interaction from a distance. The older woman gave her a knowing smile before turning away to attend to something else. It was a silent message. Change is always possible, but only if one is willing to accept it. Veronica looked back at Emma. This place, it's special, isn't it? Emma's smile grew. Yes, it is. It's not just a restaurant. It's a place built with love, patience, and respect. Everyone here is part of something bigger. Veronica nodded thoughtfully. She had spent so much of her life chasing power and wealth, but tonight she had seen a different kind of success, one that couldn't be measured in money or status. I should probably get back to my table, Veronica said after a pause. But thank you. Not just for tonight, but for teaching me something important. Emma nodded. You're always welcome here, Mom. As Veronica walked back to her table, she felt different. Lighter, somehow. Her friends looked at her curiously as she sat down. Well, Laura asked, what happened? Veronica smiled, picking up her glass of water. I think I just had a lesson in humility. Rachel chuckled. About time. The three of them laughed softly, and for the first time that evening, Veronica wasn't focused on being the most important person in the room. Instead, she was just grateful to have learned, to have changed, and to have met someone like Emma. As she took one last glance around the restaurant, she realized something. True success wasn't about sitting at the best table. It was about the people sitting around it. And tonight, for the first time in a long while, Veronica felt truly successful.